Primer, Episode 2, Places, Peoples, and Cultures of Essos and the Other Continents, Part 4, The Dancing Bears of Norvos. Situated along the Noin, one of the largest branches of the Rhine River, roughly between Qohor and Pentos, the city of Norvos was built on a series of hills and is surrounded by dark, forbidding forests full of wild animals, terraced farms, and walled villages. Now, don't let the word hill fool you. The hills we're talking about here are massive, more like small mountains. Parts of the river are flanked by moderately high rocky cliff faces called bluffs. Other parts of the river are flanked by muddy, stony beaches. The Noin River itself isn't exactly a calm, peaceful river either. It's nicknamed the Wild Sister because it's got some sections that are pretty much rapids. As far as temperature goes, summers in Norvos get swelteringly hot, and winters are bitterly cold with high winds and gray, stormy skies, so it's kind of the worst of both worlds. The Norvosi are well known for their exports of fine tapestries and this specialty alcoholic drink made from fermented goat's milk and honey. Now, I know fermented milk sounds super nasty, but think of it more like Irish cream than spoiled milk. The city itself is ringed by a series of heavy-duty, crazy thick stone walls and divided into two by a giant set of stairs that separates the rich part of the city from the poor part of the city, with the snooty rich jerks living like 300 feet up these stairs, away from the stinky poor people or whatever, like a bunch of, jerkwads. The other major feature of the city are the bells of Norvos. They're so important that they're stamped onto the coins. There are 3 of them, and they dictate when the Norvosi people are supposed to eat, sleep, work, and even when they have sex. Now, how the hell does someone convince a city full of people to live their lives dictated by the ringing of a few bells? Well, the answer is religion. That's how you convince people to do stuff they might not have otherwise done. Religion can make people do some pretty counterintuitive things, like waiting to hear a bell ring before you eat a snack, or dropping everything to have sexy times because the bells are ringing. And Norvos is heavy on religion. I mean, it's literally a theocracy. Norvos used to belong to the Andals, and they were wiped out by this religious cult out of Valyria that still runs the city as a theocracy to this day. They worship a god whose name we don't even know because only the priests and people training to become priests are allowed to know his name. And you got to admit, that takes some hardcore dedication to follow a religion and not even know the name of the god you worship. The god of this religion is said to issue his commands to the priests from deep within the actual temple at the heart of the rich part of the city. So maybe their god actually lives in the temple? It's really hard to say because of all the secrecy surrounding this religion and the ambiguity of the way the sentence is worded in the history book. The god's orders are carried out by the priesthood, who act like a governing body over the city. There's technically a council of magisters, but even the magisters are selected by this god. They also have a slave army to protect the city. I guess that's Norvos' version of the Unsullied, but instead of having their junk cut off, these slave soldiers have a double-headed axe branded or burned into their chests. These army guys even have to symbolically marry their axes. By the way, the double-headed axe and the 3 bells are the symbols of Norvos. So, what do Norvosi people look like, and what do they get up to in their free time? Well, the religious order that runs the city only allows priests to have hair and to grow beards. The other non-priest men of Norvos only have mustaches. So hipster. And pretty much everyone else shaves their head bald, even the women. But the women do wear wigs when they have to entertain outsiders because I guess they realize that other people might not be into the whole cue ball look. I say, you do you, Norvosi. Shine on, you crazy diamonds. Rock it like Furiosa. Before we get into what the Norvosi get up to in their spare time, I actually wanted to point out that we do have someone from Norvos kind of in our story. So, Prince Doran Martell of Dorn was married to a Norvosi woman named Lady Malario. She's the mother of his 3 kids, Ariane, Quintin, and Tristane, making them half Dornish and sort of half Valyrian. Now, show watchers won't have heard of Ariane or Quintin, but we did meet Marcella's fiancé Tristane and his dad Doran. This kid is actually the youngest of 3. He has a big sister and a big brother who aren't on the show. Anyway, the marriage between Doran and Malario doesn't work out, and eventually they get divorced, and she now lives in her parents' house in Norvos, but he got custody of the kids who haven't seen their mom in years. Now, as per usual, some of you must be going crazy out there. You've read the books and you look up theories, you've seen other people's depictions of Lady Malario, and you're thinking I'm stupid for saying that the Martell kids are half Valyrian, but hear me out. There are so many images of Lady Malario made by fans of the book series that show her as a black woman or a brown-skinned woman, and as a woman of color myself, I'm all for diversity, and I normally be for a lot more depictions of people of color in the fantasy genre. But let's be clear, guys, the noble people of Norvos were Valyrians, so they'd look more like Daenerys than Missandei. And that's not to say that there are only white-skinned, white-haired Valyrian people living in Norvos. That's not true at all. Remember, this is a place where slavery is practiced, so there would have been a lot of slaves of every different race also living in Norvos. Perhaps there are even merchants or traders of non-Valyrian blood living in this city. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's true. But while some of the Valyrian-blooded Norvosi would have had sex with these slaves or with these people in the merchant class, and some of these pairings even produce racially mixed children, these children would be slaves themselves or bastards of the merchant class who would most likely not be acknowledged or stand to inherit anything from their noble Valyrian-born parents. To the point I was making earlier about Lady Malario, she was a noble woman, so she would have been a legitimately born daughter of a pure-blooded or mostly pure-blooded Valyrian family, making her and Prince Doran's children half Valyrian or at the very least 1/4 Valyrian. Now, this might seem like a strange point to be hammering home, but I just wanted to remind any book readers out there about the character of Quintin Martell and possibly redeem him a little and show you that maybe he wasn't that stupid after all. Now, this is going to be a bit of a side note for specifically book readers, so if you're a show reader and you're not following where I'm going with this Quintin Martell stuff, don't worry about it. But Quintin doesn't get much love in the fan community from what I've seen. In the books, Prince Quintin is sent by his dad Doran to try and convince Daenerys to marry him. She obviously says no to him, but then she flies off on her dragon. So then Quintin tries to tame one of Daenerys' dragons and ride it back to Dorne or something, convinced that he can do this and that he didn't even need to marry Daenerys. But his plan goes horribly awry when the dragons burn him to a blackened, melting mess. Tons of book readers make fun of Quintin because his plan seems really friggin' stupid. Like, what on earth makes him think he can just walk up to a dragon and tame it like it's no big deal? Well, maybe he thought he had a real shot at taming a dragon. Remember, in episode 1, when I said it was a well-known fact that the Valyrians were something called dragon seed, which meant that they had a special connection with dragons that allowed them to successfully tame the mythical creatures. And I just got through proving to you that Quintin's mom, Lady Malario, must have been at least half Valyrian. So maybe Quintin was aware of that fact, and it gave him the idea that he might be able to tame a dragon. My clue to this is that before he executed his ill-fated plan, he thought about his mother and possibly paying a visit to her in her native town of Norvos. I know it's a loose connection or weak evidence, but being part Valyrian would go a long way to explaining why Quintin thought his plan had a chance of working. Anyway, that's the end of my side note on Quintin Martell. Back to the exploration of Norvos. So before I got onto the topic of the Martells, I was talking about what people in Norvos do for fun. Well, they're into making bears dance. Yeah, dig that. It's their main form of entertainment, if you can believe it. And apparently, on the underground sex scene, there are supposed to be places in the city where you can pay to watch a show where slave women have sex with wolves. So there's bestiality up in this town, which is hell of gross. If you're looking for a real-life equivalent to Norvos, I think the best comparison would be someplace in medieval Russia or something like that. I mean, Norvos, as it's depicted in the books, and medieval Russia had tons in common, like dancing bears, tapestries, powerful religious order, dark forests, cold gray skies, a specialty fermented drink, living off a big old river. Yeah, we can call it pretty Slavic. Like medieval Moskva or Moscow after the Mongols invaded. We'll talk more about the comparisons between this part of the fantasy world with real-life Russia in the next episode, where we explore the infamous city of Qohor, so please stay tuned.